City of Stevens Point Police and Fire Commission meeting, recorded July 10, 2025.
All right, it's 1 o'clock. We'll bring the meeting to order. Candy, can we have roll?
Barron? Barron?
Here, present.
Kirschling?
Here.
Rosick? Here. Pingle?
Here.
Zenner?
Here.
All right. I have nothing for the President's report today. Move to item number 3, approval of minutes.
Motion to approve previous month's minutes.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Number 4, confirmation of bills. Jason?
Everything looked good. No real questions other than the police annual spending, the $12,000. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on that or if it's...
Yeah, the $12,000 is an annual fee for Lexipol. Lexipol is a software program that we use. Every single officer here gets a question or a story and then a question related to the story regarding a policy, and it happens every single day of the year. So at the end of the year, they get so many hours of training for it, but it also just reminds them of what our policies are here at the Stevens Point PD.
Okay. Any other questions on the bills? Kirschling will make a motion to accept the bills.
Second by Marozek.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions, comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Number 5, recognition of Fire Chief J.B. Moody's article in the Point Plover Metro Wire dated June 24th, 2025. That was a very, very good article, Brandy. Thank you. Well, thank you anyways.
You're the owner of the paper.
Does anybody have any comments or anything they'd like to say about it?
I mean, it definitely was very, very impressive. And when I read it too, I said that, I told Joe, we definitely have to get this on the agenda to make sure that, the public is also aware of your background. I mean, there's so many things in here that I didn't know about you, and you've had thus far a very impressive life that you've led. And I think if it's out there, right, so that everyone should take the opportunity to read it.
Thank you.
I agree with that. It is very impressive, and I encourage all citizens to read this. All right, number 6, discussion with possible action to approve Officer Lucas Hughes to permanent status effective August 5th upon successful completion of his 1.5-year probation period. Chief?
Yes. Again, this is for August 5th because we are not meeting before that. Officer Hughes, and this is from his lieutenant that oversees him. Officer Hughes has shown consistent progress over the past 18 months. His work ethic, job performance, willingness to become more involved with the department are all strong assets to his character and dedication. He's quickly become a valuable member here at the Stevens Point Police Department, has really good working relationships with all the members here as well. And the lieutenant obviously highly recommends that he be placed on permanent status upon successfully completing his probationary period on August 5th. So I'm just looking for approval as long as he successfully completes the rest of the 18 months, that on August 5th he's actually placed on permanent status.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Officer Lucas Hughes for permanent status effective August 5th.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Number 7, discussion with possible action to approve a conditional offer of employment from the Stevens Point Police Department to Daniel King and Kayla Chaffin.
Yep.
Upon successful completion of their psychological and medical exams. Chief?
First of all, I'm going to start by saying it is going to be asking approval for a conditional offer for Daniel King. Kayla is now taken and removed from our process. She did not pass one of the pre-employment exams that we had asked her to take. So again, this is only for Daniel King. Daniel King attended UW Stout for 2 years and then transferred to UW Stevens Point. He graduated in May of 2025 with a 3.2 in health science and wellness, and he actually already signed up for the 720 Law Enforcement Academy, which starts in August and goes through December of 2025. Daniel is part of the Wisconsin Army National Guard. He joined the Army in January of 2020, is currently still a member, an active member as well. We talked to a bunch of references, and I know we've got some new commissioners. Every single person that we bring on, we do a background, and this is actually an example of Daniel's background. We did 9 backgrounds, and he is the only one that made it to this point that we feel would be appropriate for hiring here at Stevens Point. But the references described him as detail-orientated. He's a very hard worker. He's caring. He's trustworthy. He's very focused. He's a great listener. He's easy to talk to and great as time management. The other thing that we got to benefit with Daniel is a lot of times in law enforcement, some people don't understand. You can tell them that they have to work weekends, they have to work holidays, that they're going to miss birthdays, they're going to miss everything with their families. But his parents were both in law enforcement. His mom is currently still a state patrol officer, and his father is retired from the University of Wisconsin Stout as a certified police officer as well. And so we're asking for the Police and Fire Commission to approve the hiring of Daniel King as a patrol officer without recruit school with the Stevens Point Police Department upon successful completion of both his psychological and his medical examination, with the understanding that Daniel will complete and pass the 720 Law Enforcement Academy, which is scheduled to be on August 8th, and we would be sponsoring him at the academy as well. So again, I'm just looking for the approval to hire him and send him through the academy.
Are there any questions?
I actually know both his parents from a long time ago, and both Jerry King and Heidi King have had very successful careers in law enforcement, and it's an honor actually to be able to make a motion to approve Daniel King for a position within the Stevens Point Police Department, contingent upon successful completion of a psychological and medical exam.
Second by Morozek.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Congratulations, Daniel. Discussion with possible action to accept a donation from Giving Back, Inc., a nonprofit organization to assist with the purchase of EpiPens for police officers and squad cars.
Yes, I will keep going. So I'm going to have Assistant Chief Williams come up to the podium and talk a little bit about this. We had actually brought EpiPens into the PD here in the front office, and one of the things that she came back with was requesting EpiPens for our officers as well. There was a 26-year-old in Wisconsin Rapids who ended up passing away, and if they would have had an EpiPen with them that was available on patrol, it most likely would have saved his life. It was a peanut allergy. And so, Assistant Chief Williams, you want to kind of come up and explain the Giving Back fundraiser?
Sure, thank you. So I had heard about Andrew Mueller passing last fall. Pretty tragic, an unknown allergy. There was a benefit recently for him at Golden Sands Speedway. I attended it and realized, for one, he had a group of friends that was phenomenal. But the importance of us as first responders being able to carry EpiPens with, all of our contacts with people, and even though we have our ambulance crew close by with response. Sometimes we're there first on scene. And unknown allergies. As the chief said, Andrew Mueller didn't know he had a peanut allergy. And with a response, it may have saved his life if the first responders had the epi. Anyway, after the benefit, I learned that some law enforcement agencies in Wood County were working to equip every officer with an EpiPen. And so I reached out to the chief of the town of Rome and also the chief of Port Edwards as to how they went about doing this. And they work with a nonprofit called Giving Back, Inc. And Giving Back they have a partnership with Hometown Pharmacy, which is in Rapids. And they work on a statewide prescription to offer epi to first responders, and are willing to sell the EpiPen at a very low cost compared to some other prices that we've heard from some other pharmacies. And so the Giving Back, Inc. Is willing to work with our department to make an event, as he called it, on Facebook to say that we are looking for public support to offer to put EpiPens with every one of our officers. And that event would allow for donations to come in, and those donations would then 100% be given to our department to be able to purchase the EpiPens so that we could get them in the hands of our officers to be able to have those if we came across someone who was having an allergic reaction. I did speak with Assistant Chief Gemza. He is on board with helping train our officers so that we could use it properly and know what type of situations of when to use it. So,
How much money are you looking for?
well, with 47 officers and they're approximately $105 each, would be close to $5,000. And my understanding is the pen is good for about a year before it expires, and then you have to replace them. So.
Well, thank you for seeing, an issue and taking initiative to bring this to Stevens Point. That's much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you.
So we're looking for approval from the Police and Fire Commission because, again, we don't know what that amount will be, but we're hoping that it raises some funds. This is something that we all think that this is necessary for the citizens. So no matter what, we're going to do this, and we're going to get each and every officer an EpiPen, but it'd be nice to have a little bit of funding to assist us with that. So again, we're just looking for approval. We don't know a dollar amount, but if we get money that comes in from this nonprofit, if we can have your approval to accept it.
I think it's fantastic. I'm going to make a motion to approve the donation for the EpiPen purchases for the police department and their squad cars.
I'll second.
All right, motion is second. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Number 9, Police Chief's Report, including the 2024 Stevens Point Police Department Annual Report and recognition of Lieutenant Rob Roser and Sergeant Ross Wierzba successfully completed probation.
Correct. Lieutenant Rob Roser, our lieutenant on patrol, and Sergeant Ross Wierzba have successfully completed their probationary, which is a year long. So congratulations on them. The the Chief's Report, you all have that. Got to read through it. If you have any questions, I'll answer them. I'm going to talk more about our annual report, and I want to say this again. Every single year I say it, but the annual report, I sign it. But that's all I do with this. I write a letter. Other than that, it's put together by every single person here at the police department. And then Candy takes it and works her magic and puts it together in this. So again, it's our department that does it. It's not me. I just write a letter for it. But some of the things that's kind of interesting, last year what we wanted to do is we wanted to focus in on new technology. And so that's what I'm just going to talk about here. The things that we purchased last year, which were very expensive, is we ended up getting 2 drones added to our fleet, and one of them have thermal imagery, which has been used several times. In fact, last night, it was used again. We had an individual who ended up running from a traffic stop. They ended up having several warrants, and they were wanted. They ended up putting the thermal drone up and ended up getting a heat. The heat sensor went off, and they ended up locating that individual hiding in the woods or in some tall grass. But we've also used it for several times for individuals that have been lost or walkaways from assisted living. And so that's our thermal. We also got a second one, the Avada, which is more for inside buildings. And so instead of sending an officer into danger, we can send that in. They can take a look around, make sure there's nothing that's going to hurt them, and then the officers can actually enter. So that was some of the big purchases. The other things that we went and focused in on is we did Axon body cams, the Axon digital evidence system, and the camera systems in our squad cars. We did a lot of paper, and now what we have is Axon evidence where everything gets uploaded to the computer. All that evidence upon discovery will go to an attorney. It's all through emails and so on and so forth. So that was extremely beneficial for us here at the PD. And again, these were expensive. They're around $550,000 to do the body cams and do the cameras in the squad car. And the other thing we worked on was the tasers. The X26s that we used to have, it was a cartridge, and once you deployed that taser, in order to deploy it again, you'd have to switch out the cartridge. They have new technology called the Taser 10. The Taser 10 has actually 10 probes in it, and so if you are dealing with an individual and you need to tase them, you can aim and you can shoot, but you have 10 opportunities to actually tase that individual instead of taking that cartridge off. So again, we really focused in on technology. Those tasers ended up being, I believe, just under $200,000. So again, everything that we focused on was technology. The other thing I'd like to say is last year we ended up hiring 7 new officers, which is huge for us. Obviously, we're a department of 47. So we've got a lot of young individuals here. And then the other thing I want to point out in there, we're very lucky in Stevens Point. We're an extremely safe community, but we did have 2 homicides that you'll see under the data form, and we had 0 the last several years, but one was the individual who was beaten to death downtown, who was an unhoused individual, and then we also had a hit and run where a person struck an individual and never reported it, and he was found deceased in the woods as well. But those were our 2 homicides. So that is the chief's report. Again, I want to thank Candy for all your work and everybody else at the PD who kind of puts that together for me. I definitely appreciate it.
I'll make a motion to accept the police chief report and the 2024 annual report.
I'll second that.
All right, motion and a second. Any other questions, comments? I'd like to also thank everybody that put this together. Candy, thank you. I know this is a lot of work, and it just doesn't happen in an afternoon. So
Sarah
thank
helped
you.
me too.
Thank you. All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Number 10, presentation by Comptroller Treasurer Corey Ladick regarding the idea of a joint fire department district with Park Ridge. Chief, would you like to start with this?
Sure. As Corey's coming up to the podium, I can start. When I took over as the chief of the Stevens Point Fire Department about 3-4 years ago, I was looking at the potential of a joint fire department or we call it a joint fire department. The buzzword is kind of a joint district in the state of Wisconsin. Looking at that from a 30,000-foot view when I first took over, looking at the potential of possibly Plover Fire Department, if they were interested in at the time, actually becoming a true metro district, not what we call our current metro district that is an auto aid system. And at that time, there just really wasn't any interest in it from Plover or from some of the surrounding areas. So at that time, I kind of put it on the shelf and walked away from it for a while. I did have initial conversations with Corey about that as well. And so that's where it was kind of left. Corey has since taken the project and ran with it. And really wasn't on my radar till this past week when we sat down and went through a presentation with myself and Corey and the city attorney. And after reviewing that, we had a lot of discussion. I think there's still a lot of discussion to be had, a lot of questions, comments, concerns. I wanted to make sure that all the commissioners had this presentation ahead of time so that they could review it. And I thought it would be best suited that Corey do the presentation today, just because, like I said, it really hasn't been on my radar for some time, and I got probably just as many questions as probably some of the commissioners do as we go through this. Talking about a joint fire department now with the Village of Park Ridge, and what do they get, what do we get, I think it's going to be best suited for Corey to be able to go through the presentation and answer those things. So I'll turn it over to Corey unless someone has a question for me prior. All right, Corey.
Okay, sounds good, thanks. Are you able to pull up the PowerPoint presentation?
I'll give it a whirl.
Okay. All right. Let's see, and then I think at the top you should be able to start the slideshow.
Where?
I think if you go up to slideshow, you go.
No, that didn't work.
Or, just if you're up at the top here, if you go to from current slide or from beginning. Yep.
How do I get,
Okay, there we go.
well, that's not going.
It just
takes a second.
minute to load up on the screens. All right. So while we wait for that to load up, so for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Corey Ladick. I'm the Comptroller Treasurer for the City of Stevens Point. And kind of as Chief Moody alluded to, the reason why I'm up here is because the main motivations for this are financial. So this is basically, as far as the reasoning for why we would pursue a joint fire department with Park Ridge, it's mainly financial reasons. So if I can go to the next slide, the format of the presentation, really I organized it into three parts. First of all, what's the problem? Because I think if you're going to propose a solution, you should be able to describe what the actual problem is. And that problem is unreasonable property tax levy limits, the financial constraints that we have as a city, and low net new construction numbers. And I'll get into more of that as we get into the presentation. What's the solution? A joint fire department would provide a levy limit exception, allowing more financial flexibility, not just for the fire department, but citywide, because the fire department would no longer be competing with other departments for limited financial resources. And then what are the requirements to implement the solution? Each municipality would need membership on the respective governing bodies that have jurisdiction over the joint department, and each municipality would need ownership of department assets. One thing that I want to note is this is just an introductory presentation. We're not looking for a final decision today. In general, I don't like to throw big concepts at people and then say, okay, now hurry up and make a decision right away. So we're not looking to make a decision today. We're just looking for providing information, seeing if you have any initial questions, and then going forward with trying to answer some of those questions. And keep in mind, I might not know the answer to all the questions that you have, but certainly I will write them down and we will do our best to find those answers. So the problem, unreasonable tax levy limits. So levy limits were first implemented in 2005. They applied to the levy for operations, not to the levy for debt service. So operating and capital budgets are separate. And we generally fund our capital budget with debt service. So we're able to get around levy limits to fund capital projects. However, we're not able to get around levy limits to fund our operations, and that's really our pain point as a city. We do have challenges with capital project financing as well, but our main challenge is that operational levy, because we have very restrictive levy limits from the state. And before 2011, the way levy limits worked is it allowed for an annual increase, the greater of net new construction, or 3%. So you got a minimum of a 3% increase for inflation. That was reasonable. It didn't allow municipalities to necessarily go wild and crazy, but it also gave them something to work with to handle inflationary cost increases. So moving to the next slide, 2011, we had a tightening. And the change that was made, we were allowed to increase the tax levy for operations by the amount of net new construction only. So net new construction is the growth in tax base due to new construction minus any demolitions. If that number is negative, if you have something very large that's demolished in your community, a 0% increase is allowed. If you have no net new construction, you get no increase for the coming year. So basically, it's on that municipality to figure out the cuts or whatever reductions that they have to make to fund any inflationary cost increases. Doesn't account for inflation at all, and the ability to continue current operations at the current level is tied to the amount of private sector construction. So this really is a difficult formula unless you have really strong net new construction. So what have those numbers looked like over the past 7 years? And you can see actually the city of Stevens Point has done pretty well over the past 7 years, especially compared to other municipalities. 2020, we had a really high year of net new construction at 3.99. That dipped a little bit in 2021 at 1.19, but then came back through 2022 and 2023 around 2.5. And then one thing that I wanted to note for 2024 and 2025, we kind of saw that net new construction was tapering off a little bit and that we didn't have a lot of new projects in the pipeline. 2024 was also the year where we got a big bump in shared revenue. So what we did, working with the city council, I think we made a pretty savvy decision on that one, was to say, okay, we're not taking our levy limit adjustment for 2024. We're going to roll over that flexibility to 2025. So basically we combined those two numbers, the 2024 number and the 2025 number, to take a 3.3% increase in 2025. So that basically shared revenue got us through 2 years of basically lower years for net new construction. Now for 2026, we're projecting a number around 1%. And it's really hard in the current environment to run a city with only a 1% increase in your revenue.
I have a quick question.
Sure, go ahead.
Did we take these allowable increases?
Yes, we took all of them. The only exception to that is in 2024, we deferred the increase to 2025.
If we took these allowable increases, then why didn't the police and fire departments they had a 0% increase in their budget? If we took these increases, why did police and fire have 0% increase?
Sure, that's a good question. So the main use of those funds was to account for the inflationary cost increases in wages and salaries and benefits. And so basically that's where the money primarily went. And then there really wasn't anything left over to do, a cost increase in terms of the discretionary departmental line items. Now, that is a matter of priorities. Certainly, that's a conversation that we can have with the council as far as if they don't want to prioritize, salary and benefits as much, would you have more money left over to provide some more resources for the operational line items, those discretionary line items that the departments have? That certainly is a discussion that we could have. It's just a matter of what are your cost increases that are sort of outside of your control, and then what's the cost of salaries and benefits And, in general, over the past, really, the last year that we were able to provide something for the discretionary line items was 2020, and that's because it was such a good net new construction year.
I have a general question on that, too.
Sure.
So you originally started out by saying that this joint department, then the fire department would no longer be competing for the city financials. So that money would be freed up for other departments. My question is, have you looked at to how that breakdown would go to each department as far as for their budgets? Or a bigger concern I have, or are you just going to be stashing this away? Because back in 2021, you and I sat down and we had a conversation, and we have, back then, which I'm assuming it's more, in the unassigned general fund of $12.9 million. We also had that conversation back then, what happens with the department's budgets when they have money left over? And I was told it goes right back into that unassigned general fund. I've always taken issue with that because of the fact that there are so many needs, especially with fire and police. And, as a commissioners too, we're like to the point, spend your budgets, because you're not getting it back. It's just being, put back into this reserves. And, we serve both fire and police. And they have to have zero increase, so I get that point of the city trying to be creative and looking for other avenues. But we serve both. And we also have a police department that has been waiting on a garage for how long? And no steps have been made to facilitate that. That's frustrating to me. So I want the question asked or answered. So you're saying it's going to be less of a pull. How is that money going to be allocated?
Sure. So, a couple of things. First of all, when the departments don't spend their full budgets, basically, you're correct, it goes back into fund balance. Then what happens from there is we use part of fund balance to fund capital projects. So if we didn't have that money going back into fund balance, we would have less of a capital budget. So as much as, we might feel that our current capital budget isn't meeting our current needs, if we didn't have that money going back into fund balance, we wouldn't be able to recycle it to go back into capital projects. So that money does go back to the departments. One thing that we don't do is we don't specifically say, okay, this department returned this amount, so therefore they get this much in capital. Could we do that in the future? Certainly that's something that, is a possibility that we could certainly look at. It kind of depends on what happens with that department's budget, because sometimes it's vacancies or something where they'll save some money, that way, and then that can result in them coming in under budget, and then that builds up fund balance, but then that money, we need to keep a stable reserve, so that's a piece of it, is we want to keep fund balance stable, but the excess money that we have in fund balance goes back into capital.
So can you explain too about because this is new to us, but clearly you've had this in your back pocket that you've been wanting to bring this forward, you and the mayor, from my understanding, and this has been discussed with the city attorney also, what does that look like if the fire department's no longer competing? Where are those dollars going? How are they going to be earmarked?
Sure. So
other departments.
So we haven't gotten that far as to say we're going to earmark it this specific way. But what I would say is that what we're trying to do here is really more dodging an iceberg as opposed to setting off on a Caribbean cruise. And what I mean by that is that, in the past, we've had net new construction numbers around that 2.5–3% mark. Now we're looking at going forward having 1% net new construction. So what happens is we're looking at going into a situation where we expect things to get worse if we do nothing. So to be, really frank and really candid, this is not necessarily, I don't see us having a lot of extra money to spend in the budget. It's really more of averting a crisis is what we're trying to do here.
Hey, Corey, and I don't
Yeah.
want to jump ahead too much because
Sure.
you might have this in the PowerPoint, but if I'm understanding right, you're basically looking at creating an enterprise with the fire department.
Yeah, it would be a special fund. So I haven't figured out if it would be a special revenue fund or an enterprise fund yet, but it would be a special fund.
And there's a certain amount of money that's spent, the operational budget that stands with the fire department right now. We would continue to fund that operational budget, and then any other additional monies generated would be what would be considered this excess fund or extra value that would be receiving, correct?
Yes, sort of, and I guess we'll get into that maybe a little bit more.
Like I said, I didn't want to get ahead, but I'm just trying to understand, like, if it's an enterprise fund, are we talking about the fire truck gets sent out for a smoke alarm? And is that taxpayer now going to have a fee associated with that?
Well, that would be really an operational question that we would have to.
But that's
get
not, that's an enterprise, I'm assuming, it's not going to generate money unless.
The primary source of funding would be the assessments to both municipalities. So we're not necessarily looking at, not on account of this change are we looking at making a change in current fees or fee structures. So it's really just a difference in setup as far as, really the changes are that each community would have membership on the governing bodies and ownership of departmental assets. Those are the key changes that we're looking at, but we would still be looking at using taxpayer dollars to primarily support the fire department from both the city of Stevens Point and Park Ridge.
So what assets are Park Ridge bringing? Because technically, when you do a joint fire department, it's combined assets. And I know the answer to this, but I want you to, for the public.
Sure. So we'll get into, the ownership structure, but basically, right now, currently, the city of Stevens Point would own the assets of the fire department, and what would happen is basically we would retain ownership of those assets.
Let me rephrase the question. What do they bring to the table?
Right. It's not a tough question.
Sure. I would say,
Nothing is, if it's nothing,
yeah,
it's okay to say nothing.
There's not specific assets that they would be bringing in at this point.
One last thing I wanted to go, at this point, we have a contract with Park Ridge to provide fire service. Do we lose that money from that contract? I'm assuming if we're.
Well, this would replace that, so it would get rolled into this structure. So it would come out of that structure and go into this structure.
How much money do we get right now from that contract with Park Ridge?
So,
I know we pick up a body that they're funding, but what else?
Yeah, so we recently increased it due to the referendum, but JB, remind me of the numbers. It was like 129, 130?
I was going to say roughly annually right now it's between, I would say somewhere between like 120 and 135,000 annually is what
I'll
they're
just go
paying.
back to that. Is that position now rolled into the referendum, or
No,
separate, that Park Ridge, we signed a contract with them, we added one position,
correct,
and that was to be funded through Park Ridge.
correct.
That's not combined with the referendum, that was separate, correct?
So what happened was in this so contract prior, that's what the contract paid for, was that one position within the fire department. It was that deputy fire marshal position.
Right.
Now with the referendum passing and when we went back to contract negotiations this round, it was for the, we actually went and looked at the per capita and the equalized value as well, and we created a formula to actually now what they actually pay. So it's above to take into compensation that referendum as well. Because we didn't want to burden, if you're adding 9 people to the department, we didn't want to burden just the city taxpayers as well. So that's part of the contract it offsets. So it's actually the position plus a formula of those 9 positions.
I guess I don't understand what you're saying. So basically, that position that we got from Park Ridge has just been assimilated within the 9 referendum?
Nope, we can, so that position was what that contract subsidized that position. Then when we went through the referendum and we went to the new contract, we said it has to subsidize not only that position now, but we need a portion. If we went to referendum and got those 9 new positions, Corey was able to put a formula together that the city taxpayer paid through that referendum, $975,000 for that referendum for those 9 positions. Through that formula, we were able to figure out how much the Village of Park Ridge owed towards that as well. So we took that formula, whatever it equalized out to, plus that salary and added it. So there was a pretty significant jump in the new contract from the old annual to the new annual amount.
Okay.
Does that?
Yeah.
It's pretty muddy, but essentially, we're looking at, if we go down this path you're talking about, that contract with Park Ridge is null and void.
Correct. So basically.
So we're going to be assuming that costs within the enterprise, if I guess I'm going to use this term.
Well, so each municipality would have an assessment. So basically, the contract that we have, it allows us to cancel it by a mutual agreement. So we would basically cancel that contract and then replace it with this structure, but Park Ridge would still be paying in for the operations of the joint fire department.
What percentage is that?
It's around 2%. So I can get you the exact percentage, but I mean, it's.
Yeah, I figured it was low. That's why I asked the question.
It is, and it's, like Chief Moody said, it's based on both per capita and it's based on equalized value. So, and of course, when you compare, their per capita numbers between us and Park Ridge, you compare the equalized value numbers between us and Park Ridge, their percentages are very low in terms of what that proportion is. So that's how we get the percentage for Park Ridge.
Sure.
I have another question. I know we're not even through the slideshow yet. So my understanding with a joint fire department that, and I get it, about we have 0 increase, we're, in a crisis here for money, available money, and going this route is, in a sense, creative financing on the part of you, the mayor and the attorney. My understanding is that with the joint fire department, the consumer price index can be at 3%, which pretty much every year that is a given. You can then do a cost increase if it's 2% or less. So we're looking at 5% that you could increase the tax levy by per year without a vote going to referendum. So I believe in transparency. Equate that so that the public knows, let's just say in a house that costs $200,000, that what that 5% increase in the tax levy is going to look like. And it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's also my understanding is that can happen every year.
So you're correct that the formula is CPI plus 2%, and I get into that a little bit, further in the presentation. And as far as what that dollar amount is, basically, it would be $204,000 is the amount of additional levy flexibility that we would have. It would be just for the fire department. So it wouldn't be that all taxes are going up by that amount, but it would just be the levy specifically for the joint fire department could go up by that amount.
Right, but let's just
I don't-
break it down on a home, a value
Sure,
of 200,000, break it down so it's really transparent to the public.
Yeah, and
And my understanding is if we move to this, there's that 1-year gap where you cannot implement any increase, and then it's the next year that, and let's be realistic, it's going to happen. I mean, we're not going down this road, you're not presenting this with the thing of, we might do it, we might not do it. It's going to happen. So we need to be transparent to the public, and I want you to say on a home value of 200,000,
Yep.
what that 5% is going to look like, so our taxpayers know, and then that potentially can be every year, that additional 5%.
Yep, and I can certainly run those numbers, so.
And I guess I would like them ran, and I would like them made available, whether you do them now or you make them available through, the news so that our citizens, it's transparent to them.
Yeah, and definitely I want to make sure that all the questions that the Police and Fire Commission has, that we get them answered. And certainly if there are questions that you have, even after this presentation, that you want to reach out to me about, certainly, there will be an opportunity to do that as well. So, no, I want to make sure that we get all the questions answered, and really my thought process here was doing the introductory presentation, kind of what the concept is, then giving you a period of time to ask questions, getting the answers to those questions, getting those back to you, so that, by the time we're ready to make a decision, everybody has the full amount of information, that they're looking for.
And another question on that.
Let me have a follow-up.
Sure, Joe.
And I was going to wait until the end to ask this question, but because
Okay.
Denise brought it up, and I apologize for asking it this way, but it's a yes or no question. Taxes will go up for Stevens Point citizens and Park Ridge citizens. They will go up if this happens. Yes or no? I don't want a big muffled, well, maybe, and it could be, and well, if we do this and that. If we do this, they will go up. Yes or no?
Okay. I mean, if you're looking for a yes or no answer to that question, then I
Because
would
it's about
say
money.
yes. I mean, because it provides more levy limit flexibility. Now, does the city council have to take advantage of that levy limit flexibility? They don't have to, but it does provide additional levy limit flexibility. So, yes, there is the potential that, you could be looking at higher taxes with that additional levy limit flexibility.
Perfect.
Right, because
Denise, go
we're
ahead.
not going down Corey, this is what, we're not going down this path and doing all this, because we have a system that currently works with what we have with Park Ridge. And again, Joe, thank you for asking the question too, because it's not that the city council may not, do this. Let's be real. You're going down this route, and it's going to be implemented. I just believe in transparency. Let's just be transparent to everyone. And the other question I have on this, which we don't know, are you just presenting this to us as a courtesy thing, and that the PFC has no control over this because this is going to happen without us? Or do we need to dissolve what we currently have in order to make this happen? I'm interested in that too.
So the preference obviously would be that we get everybody on the same page and that we build consensus as far as what we're going to do. We haven't even presented this to the Finance Committee or Council yet. So PFC is getting the first kick at the can. I don't know what the Council is going to say, if they're going to say, hey, nice idea, but we're not even interested in this. That I don't know, what's going to happen.
Do you need our approval? And this is a point, just like the referendum, let's do transparency. You did not need our approval for the referendum. And the citizens spoke and said, yes, we want it. They voted, great. Do you need the PFC's approval on this, or is this something that you can just go ahead and do without our approval? It's a really simple question, again.
Sure. So that's a legal question. I don't know if Logan is prepared to answer that off the top of his head, or if that's something that we have to get back to you on, I guess.
Well, I not just want to get back to us, again, I want this to be to the public. Not just
Sure.
a call to me or call to Joe or whatever. I want this to be out there to the public so that we understand it, they understand it.
Okay. And I see, Logan, do you want to follow up on that question later, or do you want to answer that now?
Let's just say that the mechanisms that would have to occur for this change to happen are reasonably complex and merit their own slide and discussion. And we can get to.
Do you have a slide for that?
Is there a slide? Or
I
is this?
don't have a slide for that.
Okay, as long as it gets presented at some
Sure,
time back.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
this
no,
is
I
the
mean,
first level, but these are a lot of questions that, I mean, clearly, I've come up with, Joe, Tom,
Sure.
right?
And I'm assuming that would probably require a referendum on it, but just to be clear on this and everything that we talked about at this point, we currently have a contract with Park Ridge that pays for services and a position. We're talking about eliminating that, no longer taking in that money, funding that position, creating essentially an enterprise to be able to increase our levy, which I understand, but that in turn would create the opportunity to raise taxpayers' taxes within the city of Stevens Point for the privilege to provide fire service to Park Ridge.
Because without Park Ridge, this doesn't happen.
To me, that is, I don't understand that. So that, I guess, as we go into the slide presentation, I'm hoping that answers that question. Because at this point, that's, I get it where we need money and the reasons to increase the tax levy, but that makes zero sense to me.
I mean, Park Ridge gives us this opportunity to potentially do this, but we're not doing this solely for the benefit of Park Ridge.
Right, but that's kind of what it comes out.
We're doing it for the financial flexibility that it would allow, that basically, a 1% increase in levy limits every year is not sustainable. This gets us some flexibility to go around that.
Is this, because we've just gone through a referendum that increased taxes to provide firefighters, 9 firefighters. Is looking at the money, obviously, we're talking about the fire department, but it's really a vehicle to increase taxes for city operational budgets, all of them.
And that's where I was going with it. That's
Not the fire department, not the police department, citywide.
It should have a citywide benefit, correct? Yeah, and that's why we're looking at it.
What do you mean should? That's a word that I don't like, the should. Is it going to have a benefit to other departments? Not should. And you're going to get back to me on that. What does that look like? I want to see if we're going to take the fire department out, let them run as an enterprise. What is that freeing up that funding? What does it look like? Where is it going? How is it being divided? I mean, this is something that I do want you to come back on.
Sure, and I can certainly do that, understand that I'm not the sole decider when it comes to budgetary matters. So, certainly I think I also, in fairness, have to pose that to the Finance Committee as well. But yes, we can certainly look for an answer to that question.
I want to clarify something, Tom. You had said that it needs to go to referendum. I don't know that that's true.
Yeah, I don't think that's true at all. I think that,
To dissolve on optional powers, Police and Fire Commission would need to go to a referendum.
You're sure about that?
Well, I'm fairly certain.
Okay. All right, I'll take your word for it. All right. Corey, go
Okay,
ahead.
all right. So basically getting back to, sort of the problem, and net new construction is decreasing. So like I said, we're projected around 1% for the 2026 budget. As of right now, we don't have significant major projects in the pipeline to turn this around. And also building permit revenues are trending down a little bit from last year. So that's kind of like an early warning sign, an early indicator of weakness in new construction. So there is some possibility, we have some potentials for projects in 2026 that might help, but that would still leave us around 1.5%, which still is not enough to account for the inflationary increases of running a municipality. So if we can go to the next slide. So, will the new subdivision help? I know a lot of people are excited about that. We created a new subdivision really because of a shortage of housing in the community. Unfortunately, when we're looking at it from a net new construction perspective or a tax-based perspective, it doesn't help nearly enough. It requires $28 million of new construction just to get to a 1% levy adjustment. If we figure that we need 3% to run the city, that would be $85 million in new construction. And if I project 20 homes a year, $450,000 a piece in assessed value, you're looking at $9 million of new construction. That gets us 0.3% of a levy adjustment, which gets us $43,000 in additional levy capacity. So while that will help a little bit, in the big scheme of things, it just doesn't help nearly enough. In the past, what's really made those net new construction numbers work is we've relied on large commercial business construction to make our net new construction number. So large projects with $20+ million in new construction on a single site. So, are we alone? No, many municipalities are struggling with levy limits and challenges to operating budgets over the past 6 years. The average change in the consumer price index has been 3.75%. Some years higher, some years lower, but that's the 6-year average. Statewide net new construction for municipalities has averaged 1.65%, so a little bit less than half of CPI. Over that same 6-year period, City of Stevens Point average net new construction has been 2.3%, so we've been doing better than many of our peers, but still below CPI. And note that even though we have beat that statewide average over the past 6 years, doesn't really appear that we're on track to do so going forward. So will we be okay for the 2026 operating budget? Currently, it's too soon to tell, but one area of promise is transportation aid. So I don't want to, create a big stir that we have a budget crisis coming for 2026, because we do have this potential, which is transportation aid is an aid amount that we get from the state. It's based on our 6-year average of transportation expenses. In 2024, we spent extra on transportation for some projects, the Badger Avenue extension and subdivision construction, so that bumped up our average. So therefore, for 2026, we expect a bump in transportation aid that should help with the 2026 budget. However, 2025 is a more normal year for the amount of transportation spending, so we do not expect a similar increase for the 2027 budget. Therefore, we're really looking for a solution for the 2027 budget and future budgets. So that kind of covers the problem section of the presentation. So now we get into what does a potential solution look like with a joint fire department with Park Ridge. Basically, there's a levy limit exception for the charges from a joint fire department. The joint fire department charges each municipality an assessment for its services. We would likely use the same formula that we have now, which is based on both what's your per capita share of the population and what's your share of equalized value, and use that combined formula to figure out an assessment to each municipality. In order to qualify, the increase in the joint fire assessment must be less than or equal to the consumer price index plus 2%. So I used the current CPI, which is 2.4, but I mean, CPI has been all over the place. So, I know a few months ago it was around 3%, but right now the most recent number is 2.4. And then plus you have that additional 2% added to that adjustment. So that gives us a total adjustment of 4.4%. So the net fire department budget, just the city of Stevens Point, would be about $4.6 million. Multiply that by 4.4%. That equals an allowable adjustment of $204,000 for the joint fire department exception.
So back to your question, Tom. So I think what you were getting at is how much more are we going to gain if we do this? Am I wrong on saying that? So based on this, and correct me if I'm wrong, what we're gaining is about $65,000 more cash.
Well, so the $204,000 is just is not the share that Park Ridge would be providing. That would be the annual increase in terms of the Stevens Point share of the joint fire assessment. So we're not looking at charging Park Ridge $204,000.
Right, no, that's not what I'm saying,
okay,
but
yeah.
we're already getting, let's call it 130. Now we get 204, the difference is the difference.
Well, so the extra 204 would be on top of the 130. So we're getting, roughly 130 from Park Ridge, and then plus we get the joint fire department levy limit exception of 204.
But you said that 130 goes away.
Well, we would still charge Park Ridge their portion of their joint fire assessment. So the contract would go away, but we'd have a successor intergovernmental agreement that would still have them paying their share.
Is that making sense to you?
No. It's just
Okay.
not, I mean, ultimately, as it stands right there, that's just not good business. So my assumption is there is a hope that this will not just be Park Ridge in the future.
There certainly is potential to have additional municipalities. So, but for now, we're just looking at the city of Stevens Point and Park Ridge.
So what other municipalities are you looking at? And let's, again, simple question.
Sure. So, Chief Moody, I don't know if you have any insight into that one.
I don't have any at this time that I would be looking at approaching. I mean, obviously, if we got to that point where this, again, I'm taking a lot of notes here as well, if we get to that point and this is progressive and it's where we want to be, then, and it's working, then obviously I would look at other municipalities. But again, they would have to agree to be a part of this as well. And I don't know which ones right now really want to be. Like I said when we started this, when I took over as the fire chief, we do have what's called a metro district, but it's truly an auto aid agreement amongst a few different departments. And when you start something like this, again, you look at departments that have current personnel, current stations, current apparatuses, and how you then become a joint department or a district, and how you consolidate and what you'd be selling off basically helps you set up that initial process. And to me, obviously, like I said, when I approached this originally, looked at Plover, and Plover at that time was not really interested. And so right now, I don't know if there's anybody that would be interested in this. But that would be something we would have to explore down the road.
I guess that brings up my question. If we're looking at this just sitting with Park Ridge, we have a contract in, and that makes sense to create this enterprise or whatever, it makes zero sense. The only thing that would possibly lift that would be if there was the potential of expanding this. I would assume if that was the case, Have you had any conversation with the fire chief, or chief, have you had any conversation that would show that there is a potential long-term process involved here? Or is this just, we're shooting from our hip and 2027 is in the window and we need to figure out some solutions? Or is there a long-term plan at how we could create an enterprise that this makes more sense and less of a burden on the taxpayers of this community? Because right now, that's, again, I'm going back to, we're increasing our taxes to be able to serve Park Ridge, is what this looks like to me as it stands today.
I guess I'd have to apologize as the chief of the department or as the city fire chief. Obviously, I seen this last week, this presentation. Normally when I come in front of the council, or sorry, commission, I'm more well prepared for questions and answers. As most of you know, this has been on a back shelf. It is not at the forefront of where I'm at right now or the department's at. If I was asked to dive into this, I might be able to create something for you or dive deeper into what you're asking for. But as of right now, asking me today, having this for a week or so, no, I don't have a long-term plan for this right now, or I don't have an idea where this, I mean, I have ideas.
So I'm clear saying there's nothing
approached
long-term
any
sitting in
villages
the-
or any other municipalities in the local area to say, are we ready to do this or are we interested? No, I have not.
Okay, so I'm fair that there's no long-term strategic plan on moving this forward.
At this time, no, there is not.
Chief, let me ask you, that check from Park Ridge for $130,000, that goes to you guys, right?
It comes to the city, yes, that is correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're going to give up $130,000 to put $204,000 into a general fund. Am I reading?
And a position.
Yeah, and you're still paying for the position. It sounds to me like you're going to lose money, but I'm just a small business person here. But the way that I'm looking at these numbers is, we're going to take $130,000 from 400 residents, and we're going to get $204,000 from 30,000 residents. Like, does this math not math to you guys? And then it's not even going to the fire department. It could be, but it could go to subdivisions too, right? I mean, there's no guarantee that this money's going to the fire department, even though they're the ones doing the service.
There's absolutely a guarantee that this money is going to the fire department, because if we're charging it as a joint fire department exception, it needs to go to the fire department. So the $204,000, absolutely, it would be illegal to use it for something else.
Okay. That's pretty transparent, I guess, right?
You ready for next?
Yep, I'm ready for the next one. So the impact on the levy limit formula. The current operating levy is $13.6 million. So we get our 1% adjustment. That is a total allowable adjustment of $136,000. So, and that's citywide, what we're allowed to charge in additional property taxes. So with the joint fire department, you've got the operating levy of $13.6 million. You still get the adjustment of the $136,000 allowable adjustment citywide, and then plus on top of that, you'd get the additional $204,000 for joint fire department exception, and again, that's for fire department use only. So that equals a total allowable adjustment of $340,000. So that kind of gets to the question of, does that $204,000, does it get just spent, willy-nilly citywide? No, that $204,000 would be directly to the fire department.
So the willy-nilly would be the 136.
Yeah, that would be the amount that's available citywide, and it would just be that the fire department would no longer sort of have their, I hate to say their hand in that cookie jar, but that's what comes to mind, that they would no longer need to be a part of that. So everything must be included in calculating the compliance with the CPI plus 2% limitation. So that includes operating expenses, capital expenses, and debt service expenses. The city currently only has the capacity for operating expenses in the operating budget. So capital expenses are borrowed for, and then debt service is exempt for the levy limits. This would be new for us. We're not used to a restriction on debt service expenses, but as part of this, there would be that restriction. So we would have to make it all work within the within the amount that we have available, that CPI plus 2% formula. So we could include the borrowing for joint fire capital expenses and regular city borrowing, but split out a separate repayment schedule. And then also, if we need time to build up basically the capacity in that joint fire department, we could backload those joint fire principal payments to allow time to build the levy capacity to pay the debt service.
How much debt service do we have for police and fire?
For police and fire, I'd have to look at what it is, because usually I just look at the total number rather than, split out as far as how much it is. But I can certainly get back to you as far as how much of our debt service is attributable to police and fire.
Thank you.
So, just making a note here. Okay, so how would that projected $204,000 be split? So basically, we're settled with the fire union for 3% for 2027. So if you assume costs go up by 3%, that equals about $139,000 that we're anticipating would just be absorbed by the salary increases, any increases related to benefit changes, or increases related to longevity progression. Then the 1.4% would be remaining to build that debt service capital funding, which would be $65,000 under this projection. And note that that's just for 1 year, so it would build from year to year. Note that this is all projected. We don't know which way CPI is going to go, but CPI plus 2% is a generous formula over the long term. We may have good years and bad years, but should come out well over time. And also note that if we aren't able to stay within the CPI plus 2% limitation, the result is no levy limit exception, which is exactly where we are right now. So in the case that we would miss it a year, we're not really worse off than where we are right now. We're just not in the position that we thought that we would be in terms of being better off. So is an additional $65,000 a year enough to fund debt service and capital? From 2027 to 2036, I'm projecting it would grow from $65,000 to $650,000. Under this, that's what I would project. And then the projected cumulative total would be about $3.5 million by 2036. So these are projections that are subject to change, but really it should be sufficient to cover the capital expenses of the fire department. And if it's not, the worst case scenario is the municipalities would have to assist with the debt service payments, but then we would lose a year of joint fire levy limit exception because we would be over that CPI plus 2%.
I feel like I'm missing something.
Sure.
So you're not going to spend the money and you're going to bank it?
Well, so basically right now we just have the operating budget for the fire department, and it just needs to cover operations. With this, your limit is not just applying to operations anymore, it's applying to your operations plus your debt service or capital spending. So basically there's two components to this. One is your day-to-day expenses with the operating, and the other is the capital expenses. So, and basically I did that projection to see, okay, would we have enough to be able to cover those capital expenses? But over time, one of the things that I hope is that we can get to a place where rather than having to borrow $1.5 million for a fire truck, we can actually bank up $1.5 million for a fire truck and then pay for it in cash. Now, whether we get there or not, it depends on how things go, and budgets go different ways, but that's the hope, that we can start cash financing more of these capital purchases.
Okay.
So how would these increases be used? So number one, you have sort of the increases that are outside of our control, which is inflationary cost increases in salary and benefits. We do have a bargaining unit in the fire department, so we need to negotiate salary increases with them. And then debt service costs, obviously that's not discretionary either. So that would be the priority, is paying your non-discretionary items first. Then the second priority would be to cash finance the fire capital assets, kind of like I discussed before. And then number three, we can discuss other needs if we want to, or if we want to keep property taxes down, we can say, no, we're going to stay with 1 and 2. But based on the estimate in the preceding sides, we'd be looking at achieving over $2 million in additional levy limit flexibility per year within 11 years, but the majority of this will likely go to cost increases, which is kind of the way that budgets go. Most of them are taken up by those inflationary cost increases. And also, I'd note the $2 million figure is highly dependent on what happens with inflation.
Okay, so just to be clear, that
Sure.
$2 million is coming from taxpayers.
Correct. It's additional levy limit flexibility, so correct.
I just want to be very,
Sure.
like Denise said,
Sure.
transparent
Yeah.
to everybody.
No,
And
absolutely.
this is tied in with a referendum that increased our firefighters, a potential referendum for a city hall.
Well, we're not,
Just looking at all the different increases that we're looking
Sure.
at,
Oh.
and something like this.
Is there a Business 51 in there?
Oh, not yet. We can throw that.
it's-
And ultimately, and this is, I guess, a discussion that goes well beyond a police and fire
Yeah.
commission. This ends up going to council, but at some point, if it is so dire after 2027, at what point do you start looking at ripping a Band-Aid off? And it's like, what sort resources are we getting within this community that we may need to cut? As a taxpayer in this town, sometimes I wonder, when I'm looking at my tax bill coming in, what am I getting for my dollar? And we're starting to get to that point where I question that. In particular, when we're consistently having referendums or discussions such as this. Long-term, what is our status? Because again, I'll go back to this, if we want to talk about it in the small fishbowl of the Police and Fire Commission, creating an enterprise with Park Ridge doesn't sound like real good business, like that's going to answer that, unless there's some long-term strategic plan that we do not know about to answer that. And the problem certainly goes beyond this board.
Absolutely, and that's been a key, discussion that we've had with the Finance Committee and Common Council as far as, tax planning and coming tax increases, and you're absolutely right that, you've got City Hall, you've got Business 51, there's a lot of impacts to taxpayers, and, you also had a lot of people impacted with a revaluation a couple of years ago, which the city didn't collect any additional money from, but it redistributed the tax burden quite significantly to residential property owners because residential properties have appreciated faster than commercial properties. So when you had that revaluation, that was a big impact on a lot of people, and a lot of people thought that the city got additional money out of that. We actually didn't, but the tax burden got redistributed, and it had a real impact on a lot of people. So I certainly understand, what you're saying. So.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this joint fire department, and again, this is at the starting point, but this does not go to referendum. This is something that the city with Park Ridge can do without referendum. So, especially based on, and I have a feeling, my gut feeling is this is a courtesy thing that you're presenting to us. And if I'm wrong, I'll say I'm wrong, but I think that it's not going to be something that the PFC, you're not looking for approval, you're just kind of letting us know what's down the pipeline and what's coming. And that's my take on this, and if I'm wrong on that, I'll, take my words back. But at the end of the day, it's our taxpayers who, if the city's going to decide to go this route, they need full transparency. Park Ridge, Stevens Point, what this looks like, how this affects their tax, bill, and keeping it very simple. 2027, what it looks like. 2028, right? What it would look like, so that there's full transparency.
I'm not so certain that they would not require this Police and Fire Commission approval when we're talking about the operational aspect of the fire department. We supervise and oversee the operational aspects of the fire department. The money, and obviously, is a different concept, but
I guess this will be to be discovered, right?
we'll leave that for
On the next meeting.
legal.
Yeah, and kind of like I said from the beginning, this is just an introductory presentation to really introduce the concept and see what questions people have. So basically, who benefits? Basically, every department, because the fire department will have its own levy limit exception and funding source, so it will no longer need to compete with other departments for funding. Just in case people are curious, this is the breakdown of the 2025 operating budget expenditures. You can see fire is about 17%, EMS is 8%, police is 23%, so about 48% goes to public safety in terms of our current operating budget. And then if you go to the next slide.
Can I ask a question in that?
Sure.
How are they not competing? Because we're still paying an operational budget. I could see if we're talking about capital, they would not be competing with other departments, but operationally, they're still competing because our taxpayer money is going to pay for that operations of the fire department.
So basically, everything that we do is based on levy limits and what we're allowed to do under levy limits. So, and, kind of if we, going back to the slide where I kind of showed, okay, you have the $136,000 for general city operations and then $204,000 for the fire department. So you can see now they won't need to try to dip into that $136,000 or compete for that money because they'll have their own $204,000 to continue their operations. So that's really where the benefit comes in for the city. Is that you have a separate source of funding for that, 17 or 18% share of the operating budget.
So that $204,000 isn't, those specific dollars would go to the fire department, but you would also be taking away planned spending, so really that wouldn't necessarily be going to the fire department.
I guess.
So you're using that to increase taxes overall and come up with additional spending, and now you're taking that burden from the rest of the budget?
So basically, because typically every department is going to grow in terms of the amount of spending that they need to do from one year to another just with inflationary cost increases. So basically, with this $204,000, that can cover the inflationary cost increases of the fire department, plus set aside some money for capital. And you wouldn't have to, basically the fire department then wouldn't have to be competing with the rest of the city departments for additional monies that we have in terms of whether that's shared revenue increases, whether that's our overall levy limit adjustment, whether that's other revenues that the city has. So it would be a way of, I guess maybe an analogy that I could make is, so let's say you're a family and you have limited resources and you don't have enough food to go around. And one person has the ability to go eat at a friend's house. Okay, well now how does that benefit everybody else? Well, if that person goes to, let's say, eat at a friend's house, then it's more that's left over for everybody else. So that's basically, it's sort of, it's one less mouth to feed, or one less, department to have to share resources with. But yet we're still meeting the needs of the fire department. That's still getting taken care of with their levy limit exception.
And basically, you control where that additional money and how it affects the other departments. Because remember, I said one of the things I want to see from you is what does that look like? How is that extra money going to be dispersed among the departments? Because I clearly stated in the beginning, the PFC oversees the fire and police. And, there's been creative methods that with the referendum to, basically go outside and get the funding that was needed. We have a police department who, in my eyes, and probably a lot on the PFC would say too, they continue to get the short end of the stick when it comes to promises, when it comes to staffing, and I'm just using the garage as an example, and false promises, basically. So I want to see where that budget, right? Is it going to be even? What does this look like? And I have to be an advocate for both departments.
Sure. Yeah, no, and I understand that 100%. So.
Go ahead.
Okay. So we talked about operating budget expenditures and sort of the share of the pie.
You want me to keep going?
Yep, let's keep going. So what do we need to do to take that levy limit exception? So the increase can be no greater than CPI or inflation plus 2%, or you lose the exception in its entirety. So if the limit is 4.4% and you do 4.5, you lose the entire exception. So it's really important to stay within that limit. Also, the governing body of each municipality must pass a resolution to take this exception, or no one gets to take the exception. So that's also a critical point. That's why you'd want to make sure that you work with both of your municipalities in terms of generating consensus on how you're running fire department operations. So, continued other requirements for taking the levy limit exception. Must be in operation for a full year before qualifying. So if the Joint Fire Department is created as of January 1st, 2026, first budget year to take the exception would be 2027. Now, if we miss that, say we create it February 1st of 2026, then the first year to take that exception would be January 1st of 2028. So we would lose a whole year if we miss that January 1st deadline. Also, must meet the requirements of a joint fire department, which means membership. Each municipality must have membership on the bodies that govern the joint fire department, and ownership. Each municipality must have an ownership interest in the capital assets of the joint department. So we currently don't meet the above requirements. Therefore, we do not have a joint fire department that currently qualifies for the levy limit exception. Right now, it's really a vendor-customer relationship with Park Ridge as opposed to joint management and joint ownership. So basically, what we would have to do with membership with the Police and Fire Commission is we'd have to split the Police and Fire Commission in two. So the Police Commission would stay roughly the same, other than it would be for police only. And then we would have to create a joint fire commission with at least one member from Park Ridge. It's up to us to determine how many members we would have from each municipality. So you could have 5, from Stevens Point, since that's, who's currently on the Police and Fire Commission, and then add 1 from Park Ridge. The only problem is that gets you an even number. And sometimes you want to have an odd number in case there's a tie. So you could either add 1 and have 7, 6 from the city, 1 from Park Ridge, or you could subtract 1 and then have 5, 4 from the city, 1 from Park Ridge. That is something that, since I realized that this is affecting your world more than it is mine on this aspect, we're definitely looking for feedback from the Police and Fire Commission as far as how many members you think should be on a potential hypothetical joint fire commission. And also, it would be up to, obviously, all of you in terms of your meeting schedule, but if desired, you could run those 2 meetings back to back. That's the current practice for the Utility Commission and the Airport Commission. Right now, it's the same members. They run those meetings back to back so that you're not being dragged to 2 different meetings.
Corey, I have a question.
Yep.
Would you agree that police, fire, and EMS work hand in hand a lot of times?
Yeah, I think so.
How effective do you think it is if you have 2 different commissions giving potentially 2 different directions and initiatives when they have to work hand in hand, and you have the police on one side having a directive from one commission, you have police or fire and EMS on another commission, and if they don't fall in sync, how effective is that going to be for them working together?
Sure. So I understand that. The commission could have, you could have basically the same members on each commission, but of course I can't really speak to that in detail because the mayor's in charge of making appointments.
He appoints, right?
Yeah, he appoints.
So they could be 2 completely separate bodies.
They could be 2 separate bodies with very different members,
Right.
or they could be like the Utility Commission and the Airport Commission where it's the exact same makeup on each commission. So, but that would
It
be.
depends on the mayor.
It depends on the mayor.
And we have to think years down the road, not the current administration, not maybe the next administration, maybe not the next administration after that. We have to think about years down the road. This commission has been around for almost 100 years. And we have to think in that deep.
Sure.
But again, Joe, I'm under the thing is that I firmly believe that they're being very vague about it. I don't think that they're looking for our approval. I think they're going to do what they're going to do. The city's going to do what it's going to do.
Well, it would come down to if, I'm
I
guessing
understand what you're
Tom's
saying with
right, is
dissolving.
referendum, and then it comes down to whether the alders decide that this is good or it isn't. I mean, it's, to me, really that simple.
Right, and but it's at the city level.
I mean, ultimately, if you have a standard run-of-the-mill police and fire commission within the state of Wisconsin, that certainly makes sense what you're talking about, but being one of 14 communities in the state that's an optional powers, I'm not quite so sure you would be able to do that just on not even a vote, whether you can dissolve a police and fire commission without changing it from an optional powers board through referendum. So I guess that would be something we'd need to answer first. Whether that would be something we would do anyways, I understand, but going back to that last slide, I'm not so sure that's just a wave of the magic wand that you could do that.
Okay. So, and I think we'll certainly have the city attorney look into that and get you that answer. So.
You can see the excitement on the city attorney's face. Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, so I know another project for Logan. I'm sure he's thrilled. So basically, also, we would need to create a joint fire board, which basically would discharge the duties of the city council and village board as they would relate to the joint fire department. So since the city council does have some powers, they have the power to set compensation. They also have the general financial powers, the power of budgeting, and that sort of thing. So you could appoint some members of the city council and a member of the village board. One change that we would have for the city council is that the decisions from the joint fire board would mostly be final. They would not go to the full council for approval like our standing committees do. So for instance, right now with finance might approve something, council can reverse that decision. With the joint fire board, they're going to be more of the final say, but again, they'd be made up of primarily, city council members as well as probably a member of the Park Ridge Village Board. So, statutory provisions. So the major police and fire provisions are covered in statute 6213, 1 to 12. Joint fire departments are mainly covered in chapter 61, which applies to villages, so that part's a little wonky. But statute 6213 references 61 on joint fire departments, so we're not just making a guess there. We believe that the chapter 61 provisions apply. And since it would be a joint fire department with a village, that's also why it would apply. And basically, I'm not going to read the whole statute to you, but basically it says, any board or joint board created under this section is subject to the provisions of 6213, 2 to 12. So now the statute runs 1 to 12, so we're missing statute 6213 sub 1. So if we go to the next slide, that's the provision that would go away, and basically it's that each city shall have a board of police and fire commissioners consisting of 5 citizens. So that's the statute that would go away, and then that's replaced with the next slide, which says basically.
Hold on.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
That municipalities creating a joint board under this section may jointly determine the number of commissioners to be appointed to the joint board by each municipality and the length of the commissioner's term. So those are some decisions that would have to be made in terms of how many members are on that joint board and also the length of the term. So we would no longer be required to appoint exactly 5 members. So, and there are some, joint fire departments or joint fire districts that have 7 municipalities and 14 members because they have 2 from each municipality. So you get a little bit more flexibility in how many members you want to have. So that covers kind of the membership requirement. Now going on to ownership. So right now we include an amount for replacing capital assets in our fees that we charge Park Ridge, but they have no ownership in those assets. They don't build any equity, and it's all one combined fee. To keep fairness with what the city pays and what Park Ridge pays, we need to take the capital amount out of their fee and then add it back in over time. So current contract has 3% annual increases. The Park Ridge contract payment then would go down in 2026. It wouldn't go away, but it would go down. But then the flip side of that is it would then grow faster than 3% as we're taking that 4.4 or whatever the number happens to be, the CPI plus 2% adjustment, as we're adding back in the money for debt service and capital. So, and a requirement of a joint fire department is joint ownership.
Does Park Ridge want to do this?
So I talked briefly with Steve Menzel from the Village of Park Ridge, and basically, I mean, he said, I've looked at that levy limit exception on the levy limit worksheet, and I'm interested in it. I think they're also looking for more information as far as what it would all involve. So, all right. So, from reviewing other joint fire department district agreements, the following seems customary. Each municipality retains ownership of assets acquired before the district was created. And then each municipality retains ownership of existing structures and buildings. What we could do is set up a triple net lease for the fire station. So this means the joint fire department would pay for needed capital repairs in exchange for using them. And then new or replacement assets are owned by the joint fire department. Each member municipality would own a percentage of the asset, and this really only comes into play if you're going to dissolve the joint fire department. If that happens, basically Park Ridge would have to be paid for its depreciated ownership interest, and then plus we'd have to take into account the share of any joint fire department fund balance or savings, and then minus its share of outstanding debt that it would have. So one of the things that we would need to decide is what qualifies as a capital asset. And I know this is getting kind of, detailed here, but For purposes of our financial statements, our current threshold for tracking a capital asset is a value of $5,000 or more. We'd recommend the same to be consistent. So for example, we buy a broom for $20. Okay, well, it, hopefully will last for more than 1 year, but we're not going to count that as a capital asset, put it on the books, depreciate the broom, and figure out the share of what Park Ridge would have in terms of that asset. So, and then we'd also need to think through how we handle new structures and buildings, such as the training site that is still being built out. Could have joint ownership of the new buildings, but certainly that's something that we would have to talk about between us and Park Ridge as those future items come along. So, and then also finally, don't forget the resolution requirement. The governing body of each municipality, whether that's the city council or the village board, needs to independently pass a resolution to take the levy limit adjustment, and either everyone passes it or nobody gets to take that adjustment. So that's important that both municipalities are seeing eye to eye. So one of the requirements that many joint fire agreements have is a requirement for each governing body to independently pass the budget for the joint fire department. And I note one of these agreements includes 7 municipalities, which I think is kind of daunting to say, wow, you're going to pass the budget 7 times. But there are communities that are doing this, that are working together, and that are all passing that budget, passing the resolutions to continue funding of their joint fire departments. And one of the key things with having each governing body pass the budget is then hopefully that assures that they're going to pass that levy limit resolution, because you wouldn't want to get to the end where you've already done a budget and then you find out that somebody's not happy with the budget and they're not going to pass the levy limit resolution. So, and then I've also seen language related to a status quo budget continuation. If the municipalities are not able to come to a consensus, I think that that's a good idea to have, just in case there would be something that we can't agree on.
I think I know the answer to this, but I want to hear you say it.
Okay.
Because Park Ridge would only have 1 seat at the table. They really don't have any seat at the table if Stevens Point wants to do something. Mm-hmm. And all of the members of Stevens Point say yes, and your one member of Park Ridge is sitting there and says no. Am I accurate in saying that? So Park Ridge will not have a say if all the citizens or all the members of Stevens Point say yes. Park Ridge will not have a voice.
Well,
they can always withdraw from the agreement.
Yeah.
They feel they're getting a bad deal somehow.
I mean, the way I would say it is Park Ridge will have a voice because they do have a seat at the table. They won't have control, though. So they won't have
that was the word that I was looking for.
Majority of the board. So, yeah. Okay, so impacts on the fire union. So we do have Article 32 in our union agreement that specifies we'll honor the wages and benefits of our current collective bargaining agreement. We would do this regardless, but that's a key thing that obviously I don't want to create any concern that we would honor the current collective bargaining agreement. And also in our contract it says the city will remain open to discussing the concerns of Local 484 as the process unfolds. And then we would use our current contract as a starting point for negotiating the next contract. If we were merging, say, 2 different fire departments with 2 different fire union contracts, that would maybe be a little bit more tricky, but certainly we would want to do right by the fire union in this process. And then the real tangible change that the fire union would experience is there's a slight difference in the makeup of the Joint Fire Commission, which of course makes decisions on hirings, promotion, discipline, and terminations, because there would be a member from Park Ridge. I would expect that would have a pretty minimal impact on the membership, but certainly wanted to call that out. So.
One thing that came to mind is what impact, if this moves forward, what impact would it have with our county contract?
So the only thing that I could see with the county contract is we might want to just approve that in terms of getting it in the name of the Joint Fire Department instead of the Stevens Point Fire Department. Especially if we change the name and we say this is going to be, I don't know, the Central Wisconsin Fire District, we would potentially want to just update that for technical purposes.
Okay.
So, but it shouldn't jeopardize the contract that we have with the county.
Okay.
Sorry. In looking at the agenda, it talks about, we're just, discussing the idea of this joint fire department. We're having conversations about already, consolidating union contracts, and it seems like we're much further along in this process than just talking about an idea. How long have you been exploring this, and what kind of conversations have you had with council to get us to, obviously, we already talked about the fire department, and the fire chief doesn't sound like you had much conversation with him, but has this been a conversation with council presidents here? Because it certainly seems much further along than just an idea.
Okay.
So,
Sure. Mayor first approached me on Monday. We are at a celebration of a developers agreement that the contract. I sure can, absolutely. You're right. Mark Christensen, Council President. Just to clarify it, because this is very preliminary. First I've even heard of it was Monday. Happened to run into the mayor at a social event where we were doing a celebration of a developers agreement up at a Doors to Dreams thing. So this isn't anything that's nefarious plot behind the scenes or way far along. These are really preliminary discussions. I had a chance to talk to Corey yesterday.
Yep.
Real briefly, because we had a special council meeting on a different thing. So there's been you'll have way more information than anybody else. I'll be the only one on the council that's even heard this. It hasn't been presented to council, hasn't gotten, so these are very, very early on initial conversations. So no, there isn't any real planning. We're not far along in the process, so we're not even in a process yet. This is just, you guys were given the courtesy of being the first ones to actually get the information first, because it pertains most to you.
Okay.
Corey sent me the PowerPoint presentation that you're seeing today 2 weeks ago and asked me to look at the statutory provisions that are cited in it. So I read through it and had a phone call with him about those. And then last week, he and I and JB sat down and went through it slide by slide for over the course of about 2.5 hours. But when Corey sent me the PowerPoint, that was the first time that I had even read anything about this. So.
Okay, not being, obviously familiar with fire department mergers, but in my career in the police department, there's been discussions in the past concerning merging with other police departments, and even conversations with chiefs I've had in other communities that have gone through it. And it's a long process. There's, several things, including what you're talking about, union contracts. You're saying, and we just heard from the council president who just found out about it. Sounds like this is something that's just been discussed for a month. And you're already talking about trying to get something in so it can hit 2027. You got budgets, operational budgets that are just around the corner. I find it very surprising we could even have this conversation and know what we're walking into in such a short order of time. Now, granted, it is only Park Ridge, but it certainly seems rushed, and I, at least on this end, not thought through. Obviously, you had your thoughts and discussions and behind the scenes that it may be more thought through than certainly I'm seeing at this point, but that does concern me at how fast this is moving.
And I think one of the things that, one of the reasons why I wanted to get this on for July was to allow enough time to go through the process once we got it to the respective boards. So basically, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure we had at least, 5 months to really dig into things, like I said, to answer questions and so on and so forth, so.
Can I ask a question? And
Sure.
Chief, you don't have to go into details if you don't want to, but I'm just curious, as we take on a partner, how would your responsibilities change? For the city of Stevens Point, you obviously have responsibilities about hydrants and streets and artery roads and stuff, correct? How would that change looking at Park Ridge and your limitations? Obviously, the streets are different than ours. I don't know if they have hydrants. Can you talk about that? Would your responsibility go up? Would it, how would that differ than what we're providing them now for a fee? You know what I mean?
So I guess the question at hand is, how would it change my job into the future with this process or with this potential? I think I'm going to hit that with what Commissioner Zenner had stated earlier. As a 4-year fire chief, I can honestly look at this commission and say, rest assured, if directed to move forward with this and we move in this direction, like I've proven to this commission before, I will take the time. I will learn the system. I will learn everything that we need to know about it. I will make it bulletproof. I will come in with my I's dotted, T's crossed, belt and suspenders, and I will have the answers for you in the future. You asked about a long-term plan, and we're going to talk about strategic planning in my chief's report because I feel it's important to have that plan always. If, again, given this order that this is what we're going to do, not will I only learn the system and become proficient in it, I will have a long-term plan. And I can tell you right now, if we go this route, my long-term plan would not be, if we're going to learn all this and do all this, I don't think we stop when we just look at Park Ridge. I think we have conversations then with the Village of Plover, with the Town Hall, with other people in this metro district if this is what we're going to truly do. But what I will tell you is from talking to the chiefs that run these types of departments and, pulling up, as you saw on one of your slides, one of those chiefs runs 7 different municipalities as the chief. I will tell you, as a chief, you don't become a chief anymore. You become a CEO of a business. You have to run a business process. And I think my job as the chief is going to change. What I'm going to have to learn or bring to the table is going to be completely different than what I'm doing right now. Talking to the chiefs that do have these things, you become more of a financial chief, more of a politician than what I currently am right now. I mean, that's all you do is politics and the financial aspects of these departments. You don't deal with any operational contact. You don't deal with the day-to-day stuff. You don't deal with any of those things. You are meeting with boards, commissions, councils of all these different municipalities and running truly that type of business. So to answer your question, I think my job would change, and it could change significantly depending on what my future vision is if we go down this road. Because I'll be honest with the commission, if I'm going to learn this, if I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be good at it, because that's what you expect me to be, is the best, why are we going to stop with one municipality? Let's look what it's going to look like long-term for the large scope of central Wisconsin.
Would it be fair to say, too, that because basically an enterprise, you're running a business, and as a CEO, and it sounds like you've reached out to others, who are successfully doing this, realistically, your salary is going to jump because not just being a fire chief, you're a CEO, you're running a business. I'd be interested in, and I don't expect you to have that right now, of what that looks like, right? Because I'm considerably being paid a lot more because of the role that they're in.
And I don't have that.
Yeah, right, and that, but I'm just saying
right
that that's
now off
also
the top of my
something
head.
that would realistically happen.
Right.
And potentially it could happen then along the lines of management teams too, because if they're being put in different roles that are no longer just, right, they're given duties of what it is, that can all change too.
And I
Just to jump in on that and to expand, again, if this was just Park Ridge, it really makes no sense. It makes more sense if it was going to increase long-term other departments, and you start talking about other departments that have their own bargaining units, which can have impact not only whether this is feasible to move forward or whether there would be an increase in costs if another bargaining committee has firefighters that make more money than what our firefighters in Stevens Point make. I don't know what that case is, but there's long-term strategic plan, and you start talking of other entities, is much more of a conversation than what we're having today. And again, where I'm thinking this ball is moving way too fast and needs more conversation to meet deadlines of 2027 or at the ends of this operational 2026 operational plan, which is what, a couple of months away.
Jason, was part of your question, what are the additional costs going to be, such as what Denise had said, salaries, infrastructure?
I
Was
think
that part of what your
all of
question was?
it. I also think that, I mean, how does the equipment run on Park Ridge streets? I mean, right now, who's responsible for that? If they're paying us a fee and your engine's damaged, does that go towards the city of Park Ridge, or is that our fault? Or like, how does everything change? I mean, in terms of, like I said, the limitations of really looking for such a small part of the community, but it's kind of becomes a big part of the community. I know I'm not being very clear, but this is an added responsibility and added work that right now we're already getting paid for. And I just look at that, and to piggyback on Tom's, why not wait for 3 or 4, why not table this and wait for 3 or 4 communities instead of getting 60,000, get 600,000, right? And then have a plan for additional fire stations and a city, a full community plan instead of just a city plan. I think it's like, why not drink from the fire hose instead of the faucet? You know what I mean? It's like, why? I just feel like this could be dipping our toe in the water and it could end badly, and I think you might not get what you're expecting from it because of the full, and the council is here, and I'm sure, but this sounds to me like a money grab. I mean, to me, it's like, we got a really good thing going right now. You said in one of our meetings, I said, what is the cost per call that we go to Park Ridge versus an average call? And you said it's minimal. And I said, wow, we're making a lot of money off the city of Park Ridge right now. And I'm sorry that's for the pub, but they're paying us for minimal calls there. We have a really good thing going right now, right? That this could change significantly, and it could become a tax increase for all of Stevens Point, who might be like, what's going on here? So I would like to get everything out in the open and all, it's not lightly. We can't take this stuff lightly. It's kind of if we have any power at all.
Are
Right?
you looking for an answer from someone?
I don't think I'm anyone.
I'm expressing valid things that, that we
and I
need
agree.
to
They are
really
all valid.
have answers to.
Yeah, I mean, it's, right now, I think that over the last few meetings, we've talked about a plan for our fire department. Now you're like, well, my role is going to change from chief to CEO when we're trying to get our house in order, right? A little bit. We're trying to clean up. We're not even fully staffed in Stevens Point. I don't know how many calls. We saw the numbers at the beginning of the year, but, you know, it's something that, you know, that I'm concerned about for you guys, you know, and your workload already, so, but.
Corey, you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead to the next one. So basically, overall progression of fire intergovernmental cooperation, you know, you've got your single departments that kind of all do their own thing. Then sort of the next level of intergovernmental cooperation is the MABUS mutual aid box alarm system, where we all help each other out. Then we've got Metro Fire, where there's the automatic mutual response with the city and some surrounding municipalities. Then you have contracted services, which is something that we obviously started with Park Ridge a couple of years ago, and then kind of one higher level to that is the joint fire departments or joint districts, where you have joint management and joint ownership over that fire department. So getting into optional powers. Currently, one municipality has adopted optional powers, the City of Stevens Point, the other has not, the Village of Park Ridge. Under state statute, both municipalities need to adopt optional powers for it to apply. So the statute is optional powers of a joint board, listed under 6213 sub 6. Apply only if the electors in each municipality approve these powers by referendum. The current understanding is that since the joint fire department would be new, both municipalities would need to pass an optional powers referendum for optional powers to apply. So, and then also getting into, you know, what about consolidating into one municipality? That's a conversation a little bit more for the city council, but, you know, certainly I'll include you guys in on that as well. So if we consolidated with the Village of Park Ridge, I projected city tax revenue off of the village based on their tax base of $737,000. The projected levy flexibility of the joint fire department over 11 years would be a little bit over $2 million. So long-term consolidation may still make sense, but it would hopefully be a long-term goal. And we also may need various legislative changes to really make consolidation make sense. So I just wanted to hit on that briefly, because that's a topic that's also being discussed. And then staying realistic. So, and yes, want to be transparent about what this is and what this is not. So for the overall city budget, this is helping avert a crisis as opposed to a windfall. So I know I said that before, but I think that's key to understand that really, like I said, we're sort of dodging the iceberg rather than setting off on a Caribbean cruise.
I just have to say this. So you're telling me in this commission that we're averting a crisis because we're getting $136,000, I think it was $136,000 more?
Well, we're helping to avert that crisis. I mean, fair point that I think we're going to need to have additional solutions in addition to this.
What's our budget? What's the total city budget?
It's just under $30 million.
I don't think $136,000 does a pinch of anything.
Yeah, correct.
Avert anything.
Well,
so I just want to be very clear on that.
Sure.
That's my opinion. I don't know if that's the opinion of other
Right, when you use the
commissioners.
word crisis,
Yeah,
I mean, that's.
crisis is serious. $136,000 is nothing. So.
Yeah, and see, that's, and I'm glad that you said that, because that's the issue that we're dealing with, is that, you know, with the state levy limits being as strict as they are and giving us a 1% increase, so we get $136,000 to fund inflationary increases on a $30 million budget. That's the issue that we have. And this will help with that, but yeah, being realistic, is it going to solve our entire problem? No.
That's
but
like
it'll
spitting
help.
on a house fire. That's about what it's going to do. Just my opinion. 136 is nothing.
Yeah, and that's why I know, you know, when we originally went through this presentation, the city attorney said, oh, it's, you know, subjective to say that, you know, levy limits are unreasonable, but I think that levy limits in their current form are unreasonable, as far as to say you get 1%, you know, to cover your cost increases, when inflation is 2.4 or 3%.
I mean, is this a backdoor to raise the taxes on Stevens Point residents? And just, please be honest, because I think everybody wants to know. Is this what this is?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a backdoor.
Right now, with our current agreement with Park Ridge, there's no way you can raise Stevens Point taxes to go towards Park Ridge. But right now, with this proposal, you can say, oh, okay, now we can raise Stevens Point taxes. Correct? Yes or no?
We get additional levy limit flexibility that we have.
I think you should have probably started
room.
off with that. I mean, honestly, because you're talking
That's
to a
exactly what
community
I
who's,
asked at the
my
beginning.
taxes, our taxes have gone up 33% in 3 years. I mean, come on. Subdivisions, and now this is, okay, the paper's here, right? You got that? Can that be the headline? Can that be the headline, please? Thank you. And it's not your fault, I know, I'm just.
Yeah.
It's so,
And
this is a lot of word salad.
Don't
just-
take this
No,
as an
no,
attack.
But it's
And
just, we have to be
I'm-
transparent. We have to be so
I'm not,
transparent
yeah.
to the public, and they deserve it.
Yeah,
That's the thing.
Absolutely. And I think, what we're trying to get to is where things are reasonable, and that's why I wish that levy limits would have stayed at you get 3% or net new construction, because that was reasonable. It didn't allow municipalities to go wild and crazy necessarily, but it allowed them to account for their inflationary increases. And the other thing that I'll say, and like I said before, is a lot of the impacts on property taxpayers have been the result of cost shifts in the tax burden due to the recent revaluation. So I've had people calling my office complaining, especially when the revaluation first came out, saying my taxes went up $700, my taxes went up $1,000. How am I supposed to deal with that? So I get it. It's a tough position to be in, because we're really in between a rock and a hard place, where on one hand, our property taxpayers have gotten beaten up, and I will agree with you 100% on that. On the other hand, we're trying to continue the current level of services that we have as a city, and that's sort of the conundrum that we have, and it's a rock and a hard place, absolutely, as far as what we do going forward.
Hey, Corey, and one, I want to appreciate the fact that you've come in here and talked to us, and you're not in a very comfortable position right now. And that being said, I go back to initially what we discussed when we started. To take away a contract that already exists with Park Ridge, or however you want to look at that, and to create a tax levy, essentially how this comes across, we're just raising taxes for the privilege to provide Park Ridge with fire service, and that's what it looks like. If that is how this ends, without a long-term strategic plan to expand this district, I just don't see that. That's literally, as a taxpayer, that's what I'm looking at. I get to pay more taxes, so Park Ridge gets fire service. That's how it reads. Now, if it expands to other fire agencies out there, that might make more sense, but it doesn't really sound like that's the case. And that's certainly a bigger conversation when you start talking about true metro units. Mm-hmm. And I certainly don't see us there. If that is a conversation that you're having and where this plan is, I'm very concerned if that's the direction we're going, and that's as far as we've gone at that point, is looking at Park Ridge.
Yeah, and maybe I can touch base with you and we can figure out a way to communicate this a little bit better, because that's certainly not the impression that I want the public to have, that we're raising taxes to provide service to Park Ridge. I can understand why somebody might be under that impression, but that's not, basically, we would be looking at this to maintain current city services is the problem that we're trying to address.
And I think we're not looking at individual conversations, because I know you've stated a lot of times, I can get back to you on that. This is you to come back and answer all of our questions.
Sure.
So all 5 of us and the public, because that's what I guess we expect, and that's what our citizens deserve.
Sure.
Mr. President, that was Siri going, what are you guys talking about? Yeah.
All right, so.
All right.
This isn't music to your ears right here?
Do you want me to
Oh,
proceed or?
just a couple of other things, because I wanted to make some other points here. So for the fire department budget, a good portion of the flexibility would need to be used to cover inflationary increases in salary and benefits, as well as debt service and capital projects. So again, I don't want to give the impression that this is going to be a huge windfall. CPI plus 2% is still a restriction to follow, and each municipality still needs to approve the budget. City Council has set target maximums for tax levy increases. So that's where I know you kind of wanted a yes or no answer on tax increases and what we're doing with the tax levy long term, but ultimately understand that is up to our City Council to determine. And also want to be very upfront that I cannot predict the outcome of a potential optional powers referendum in Park Ridge or Stevens Point. So, and I know that that's probably not what you want to hear, but I'm laying it right out there that it's a referendum. I don't know how people are going to vote. Hypothetically, it should hopefully be easier than asking people for money, but the challenges that you're going to have are that it's just going to be difficult to communicate and get people to understand even what a police and fire commission is, what optional powers are. So that's the challenge that you have with the referendum requirement. So items we will need to decide. First of all, we do still need to decide if we want to pursue this option. Note that it does at least help with significant financial challenges. Frank, in my opinion, I think it's hard to pass up a $2 million idea given the current challenges. And then we'll also have to decide number of members on the Joint Fire Commission and the length of terms.
Just to be clear.
Yeah.
It's really nice to put the $2 million number out there, but our budget is $30 million. Let's do that over 11 years. $2 million, again, is nothing. I just want to be, that's a statement, you don't have to respond.
Sure, okay, all right, fair enough. All right. So, also, we'll need to decide the number of members on the Joint Fire Commission and the length of those terms. Need to decide the number of members and composition of the Joint Fire Board. And also, if we do this, we'd have to pick out a name for the Joint Fire Department. Joint Fire Department is what's used in state statute, but you could also call it a fire district. That's also commonly used. I threw out a couple example names, but certainly if there are others that people have, if we get to that point. I'm just throwing everything out on the table, right now.
This is really deeply thought out for just a first, initial presentation. I mean, wow, that's all I got to say.
I did my best to come as prepared as I could, so, And then next steps, so basically you can either call or email me. Certainly, if you think of additional questions, I know you've asked a number of them during the meeting, but if you do think of additional questions, feel free to either shoot me an email or call me. I had on here, please submit all questions or concerns by Monday, August 11th, and then hoping to make a decision on pursuing this during September meetings, at least, not that we would approve an intergovernmental cooperation agreement at that time, but at least to say, yes, go ahead and approve a intergovernmental cooperation agreement, or no, we're not interested in doing this. But I will also say, if we feel like we need more time, if we feel like, the January 1, 2026 just isn't realistic, we can certainly extend it. It's just that we do lose a year of levy limit flexibility.
Just off the cuff, why August 11th? What is this tied in with committees or something, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I was hoping to get all the questions from the Finance Committee by then. I know you guys have your meeting before, typically before we have our committee meetings, but that's why I threw that in
So your
there.
plan is to take this forward to finance?
Yeah,
or-
it's on the agenda for finance for Monday.
Okay.
to
Is
get
that a
on-
discussion, or is that a discussion with action?
It is a discussion. It
Okay.
is specifically listed as a non-action item.
Okay.
It's a presentation only. So, yeah, just like it is here. So, and with that, that's all that I have for the presentation. So,
Corey, and again, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, okay.
I know it's not comfortable. Thank you for taking the time.
Sure.
Thank you for fielding the questions.
Sure.
And bringing it forward to us, and quite frankly, to the public. So there can be further discussions. Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. And like I said, if you have further questions, just feel free to reach out, and, happy to get everyone's
anybody
questions or
have any-
concerns
Are we going to
answered.
open this up for if the public, we see some people that aren't regulars here, that if they want to have a voice or anything, are we doing anything on that part, Joe?
It's, I guess, up to the commission. I'm not opposed to it if someone has questions.
I just want to make about 1 minute follow-up comments here. Those first slides when Corey was just talking about the bigger budgetary concerns here. So it's about 80% of our operational budget is wages and benefits, give or take. It's pretty close to that. So that is most of the money we spend operationally. And in any given year, the way that most staff are paid, basically anyone who's not in the fire union, police union, or transit union, is paid based on our wage plan, or our, what do we refer to it as? The pay plan. The pay plan. So it's this matrix and has a bunch of numbers on it and letters and everything. And every year the council endeavors to take all those numbers and raise them by an amount equal to CPI. It's like, we don't want our employees losing their buying power over time to inflation. And I know, Joe, you commented a couple times like, well, this seems like a drop in the bucket. But if you really look at crunch those numbers, it's in the ballpark of the amount of money we need to do an inflationary adjustment to that in a given year. Now, it's not going to be enough on its own to do that, but it's a significant contributor to getting you across the finish line to just keep people up with inflation. And if we start having years where it's 2.5%, 3% inflation, but only a 1% levy increase, we are going to start to fall behind on that. And the way that actually comes home to roost is that over time, people move on to other jobs. Maybe you have a hard time filling that position because they're not competitive in the market as much as they used to be. And over time, you have a gradual hollowing out of your workforce in terms of talent, in terms of retention, in terms of consistency. So that's the, when Corey says crisis, it's not like, everything's going to go haywire one year. But over time, you do have a really meaningful long-term decline in just your ability to keep and attract the best possible staff.
From my standpoint, $136,000 in a $30 million budget, I don't think it takes a whole lot of smarts, and I don't mean any disrespect to anybody, but it doesn't take a whole lot to shift things around if we need to come up with $136,000 some other way. There has to be. There has to be.
Now, Corey, that $30 million includes capital too, right?
No, that's
just operations?
That's just operations.
There has to be. I mean, I just don't buy into that even a little bit. Somebody gives me $30 million and they go, come up with $136,000. I think anybody in this community could go, all right, we can move some things around. That sounds good. I don't buy that it's significant, because if we have to keep up, I agree completely with you. We have to keep up with wages. We have to. What about shifting things around? What about taking in things that maybe aren't as important as fire and EMS or other departments? It just doesn't seem significant to me at all. And I hear exactly what you're saying. And I agree that we do need to keep up with and keep good employees and retention. But in a $30 million budget, That's just my opinion.
I guess the concern I have, and I agree with what Logan talked about, majority of a budget with the police department all went to wages. There was really little discretionary costs that you had associated. What really concerns me, though, is when we're talking about that low number of 136,000. I can remember working within the city, and I believe it was 2008, and we had a severe recession. And just as a police department, we had to find a way to eat $250,000 just in our budget. And I think at that point it was about $5 million. So what really concerns me now, what we're discussing, if we're looking for ways to generate $136,000, I'm more concerned what's going to happen if we have another 2008 and we're not prepared for that. That's the concern. So looking, again, going back to just Park Ridge, this doesn't make sense, but if that was something that was to expand beyond that, where you could start generating more money to be able to weather a storm like that easily could come, or we're going to have to start looking at bigger than just the Police and Fire Commission, what services do we need to dial back from?
And of course, those truly rainy days like a recession, financial crisis, that is part of why we try to maintain a very responsible amount of fund balance too, is to help insulate if those types of things do happen. But obviously that's more of your thing, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any, Mary, go ahead.
Hi, Mary Nebo in District 7 Alder Liaison to Police and Fire. This might not be the right place for the comments, but I'm going to throw them out there anyway. We have a much bigger problem, and it starts at the state level. Changes have to be made there. We keep trying to fix problems they're creating for us. At some point, we aren't going to be able to tax fixed income people like me enough to do anything. If we keep fixing things with Band-Aids, the state thinks, oh, Stevens Point, they don't need more shared revenue. They're getting by just fine. Maybe the time is coming that we need to start services and say to people, call Patrick Teston, call Vinnie Moresi, call the Speaker of the State Assembly, the President of the State Senate, and let them know how much this is affecting us. In my mind, we're going to create an independent commission appointed by the mayor with the ability to levy taxes separate from the taxes that'll be levied by the city, by the vocational and tech school, by the school district, which are also screaming for money and raising taxes via referendum. The well is going to go dry a lot faster than the thirst is going to disappear. As someone on a fixed income, I'm right now putting as much money aside a month to pay my taxes as I am to pay my mortgage. And it's not going to take much before I'm paying more in taxes than my mortgage. And then I start thinking about selling my house and moving someplace less expensive, The bigger problem is that the state's not giving us enough money, really. That's what it comes down to. That's where the fix needs to come from. We can't keep fixing things on our tax base. We just can't. And it just seems too, and this is nothing against the fire department, but what about the police department? They are lost in all this. Are they going to get a little extra money? But they're not, we can't have a police district, but we should, maybe. And then you've got two split authorities. You might all be on the same two boards. But again, it comes down to an independent appointed authority with the ability to raise my taxes far and above what the city can. If we can only go 1%, but the CPI is 2 and you can go to 4, that's basically a 5% increase in my taxes. 4 for the district and 1% for the city. I don't see how the property tax base can bear much more of this. I think we've got to get some remedies from the state. And we all can be involved in that by reaching out and saying, look, we just can't continue to put the burden on people with fixed incomes, people trying to buy a home for the first time, people trying to find affordable rent, people trying to pay for groceries. Do I pay my mortgage? Do I pay the rent? You know, do I pay taxes? Do I pay for groceries or medicine for my kids? There's just not enough money. There's just not enough. And until people start feeling the pain, maybe the folks that can make the decisions to change things, maybe they'll do it then, when they start hearing from people that are really feeling the pain. So anyway, just my perspective.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks.
Any other?
Does anyone else want to speak?
Everybody's scared.
Now's your
Corey.
chance.
Thank you again.
All righty, thanks.
Very appreciative.
Yeah,
Appreciated. All right. Let's see. We'll just go like this. And that. And there we go. All right. Number 11, enter into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, Sub 1E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, and Wisconsin Statute 19.851E, deliberating and negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, that seems to be all the same thing, or conducting other specific public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, and Wisconsin Statute 19.851, consisting financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where par sub B applies, which, if discussed in public, would likely have substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations for the following. A, discussion on refunding costs of preliminary employment screening to a former fire department employee. B, discussion of possible joint development partnership and sharing of building space for a new emergency services training facility. With that, we need to have a roll for going into closed.
Barrett?
Yes.
Kirschling?
Yes.
Rozek?
Yes.
Pingle?
Yes.
Zenner?
Yes.
We are in closed session. Number 12, enter into open session to take action on closed session item A, discussion on refunding costs of preliminary employment screening to a former fire department employee. And item B, discussion of possible joint development partnership and sharing of building space for a new emergency services training facility.
And I am going to make a motion on 12A, a motion to refund $3,574.25 in employment costs to a former fire department employee who resigned during the probationary period.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion, a second. Any other thoughts, comments? Hearing none, we'll go individually on a yea or a nay.
Barrett?
Yay.
Kirschling?
Yay.
Rozek?
Yes.
Pingle?
Yay.
Zenner?
Yeah.
All right, all yeas, motion carries.
All right, then I will make a motion on 12B. The motion is to grant permission to explore a joint development partnership for a new station and public safety center and its funding.
I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Hearing none, we'll go individually on that as well.
Barrett?
Yes.
Kirschling?
Yay.
Mrozek.
Yes.
Pingle.
Yay.
Center.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Number 13, Fire Chief Report, EMS Report, EM Report. Where did everybody go? Chief, go ahead.
All right, well, we're going to keep this brief this afternoon, or I should say this evening. I just want to let everyone know that we are continuing to move forward with our strategic plan in the Stevens Point Fire Department. That is our roadmap over the next 5 years, and so it has been going well. We're looking to have it done sometime by the end of this year. I will be bringing it in front of the commission and council as well to look at that strategic plan and take action on it. I feel that's an important part. Also, I wanted to point out firefighter paramedic conditional offers. Last month when I came forward, I was looking to put out 5 conditional offers of employment or conditional offers of employment pending the interviews that we still had to conduct. I did put out 5 conditional offers after all the interviews were conducted and meeting the requirements of the Stevens Point Fire Department. 3 have accepted the conditional offers. Tucker Bart, Cooper Benke, and Harper Hogger. So the 3 of them have accepted conditional offers with the Stevens Point Fire Department, and just wanted to congratulate them and wish them well in the future with the Stevens Point Fire Department. Lastly, we did and we are continuing to modify and review things when it comes to mentoring and coaching our employees within the Stevens Point Fire Department. We just added a new policy and procedure which we dove very far in depth in. We trained on all 3 crews, talked with all of the supervisors as well, in the process of how the expectations should move forward in our department when it comes to coaching, counseling, and putting people on personal improvement plans when they're not on probation. When they're on probation, obviously we have DOR programs for our supervisors. We have monthly, quarterly reviews, and then their annual performance review. Once you come off probation, it's usually just an annual review, but we wanted to give those tools to our supervisors to be able to go more in the depth to help where there potentially could be some needs for other current employees in our department. And then lastly, I have actually, that's about it. That's all I got for the police, fire, and EM report.
What is the weekly scrap 94?
The weekly scrap?
Under training?
Do your damn job.
Yep, so it's basically, it's a podcast that we have. We go out and we look for good quality podcasts that we want our employees to review and listen to and take something away from it to either help them facilitate where they need to be going in the department, what they need to understand about the fire and EMS service. So it's a podcast that we have them go out and listen to. It gives it current credibility to the fire and EMS service.
Very good. Any other questions? All right, we have a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the fire chief report, EMS report, and EM report and put on file.
Second it?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions? All right, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, hearing none, motion carries. We are adjourned.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.